Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in and welcome back to another installment of the series of A to Z of plants here on Humble Jungle. Today we're going to be talking about the begonia. Now, when talking about begonia, it can get very confusing because there are over 1,800 different species of begonia. Begonias have been divided into three types: fibrous, tuberous, and rhizomatous. I'm going to cover these in a bit of detail so you know the difference, because depending on the type may also impact whether you choose to have these plants indoors, outdoors, and different care factors that might apply for each of them. Let's talk tuberous. Tuberous begonias are best for outdoors. They're usually identified by their flowers. These can be lots of little flowers or even getting as big as dinner plates.
Tuberous begonias grow from tubers similar to potatoes and reach their peak in late summer and autumn, where they grow from generally around 30 to 50 centimeters tall. In winter, the flowers and stems above ground will die, but the tuber will have actually gone dormant. In Australia, that's usually between early June to August. These are suited to cool climates and aren't particularly a tropical plant.
On to the rhizomatous begonia. Now, if you know begonia or have purchased some begonia before, you may know these as being a begonia rex. They're a very, very popular cultivar within the rhizomatous group. If you own indoor plants, it's highly likely that you own a rhizomatous plant. The reason being is that lots of people like me who like indoor plants love foliage, and that is what you're going to find with the rhizomatous begonia. They have the most stunning foliage. If you look at any of the rex species, you get so many different patterns, leaf shapes. They're stunning. Stunning. This right here is one of my begonia rex. I will talk a little bit about care later and touch on why he is smaller than I would like him to be and smaller than how I actually bought him. But I do just kind of want to bring him up so you can have a look at this stunning foliage. These older leaves do have lots of pinks and reds. This one over here is quite red and black. And when you have a look at these leaves down here, they are a lighter color, and something I really appreciate about this plant is all the leaves, I don't know whether the camera is actually going to pick it up, but they have this stunning iridescence, which I think is just beautiful to introduce indoors. If you're trying to identify a rhizomatous begonia, it is easy because you can actually see here, and I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but you can actually see these rhizomes on top of the soil. And that is what's going to assist you in identifying a rhizomatous begonia. But if you have a rex, it's a rhizomatous. This one here, I believe, is a begonia Ballarat. I'm going to insert some footage so you can see a little bit more what he looks like. He's one that usually lives outside. He was actually a gift from my grandmother, so he has a lot of importance to me. He, I believe, is a begonia Ballarat, and I may not be correctly identifying these. Often these have been gifts to me, so I haven't actually had anything specific to base it on. I've just tried to do my best in IDing them, but from the best that I can ascertain through Google, speaking to people within begonia groups, I do believe it is some form of Ballarat. As I said, he lives outside. Usually I have brought him in. I'm not going to bring him too close because he is in quite a heavy, big pot. A third type of begonia, and my favorite type, is the fibrous. Essentially, anything that doesn't fall into a tuberous or rhizomatous variety will be considered a fibrous begonia. Now, these are very popular. You've probably seen angel wings, begonia maculata, begonia maculata whiteizer, one I've got over here. These are identified usually by their long, they have been described as bamboo-like. I don't know if I'd describe it as bamboo-like, but they are described as having a longer stem. You can see here, this is another one that was actually gifted to me by my grandmother. He's one that actually lives outdoors, and let me tell you, he actually enjoys it out there. I haven't had him super long, but he's really enjoyed being out there. I like seeing that as he matures. Let me just come in a little bit closer. I've had him indoors for a couple of days and I don't think he's enjoying it too much. And you'll see here with these more developed and mature flowers, I'm getting this cute little ring around the edge of the leaf. He was flowering ever so slightly when I was given him. So this one I can actually say has these cute little pink blooms. I think he would make an ideal plant either indoor or outdoor. And if you like leaves, begonias are for you. These next couple are gonna take me a little to move around to bring to the camera, so do bear with me. I do have a few different varieties of angel wing begonias. Again, some of these were gifted to me. I don't know the exact genera, but please, please, if you know, chuck a comment down below. If I get it wrong, don't blame me, guys. I'm doing my best. This first one, and probably the, I'd say the most sentimental to me, is this begonia here. It is, again, a fibrous begonia. It is an angel wing. I mean, look at it. You have these beautiful angel wing shaped leaves. And let me just get a little bit closer. These sweet little silver dots. Now, when I say silver, I mean silver. I'm not talking like a little white dot. I'm saying this silver reflects in the light. It almost looks like someone's kind of flicked silver paint on them. And that's something that I really enjoy. This, to give you a bit of background on this plant, this exact begonia was given to my husband's aunt by his mother for her wedding day. Her wedding day was about 30, 40 years ago. This begonia has survived and thrived, obviously, for all this time, and she was sweet enough upon hearing that I love begonia to actually take a cutting, root it, and bring it down for me. So he, I suppose in a lot of ways for me, is a bit of a family heirloom begonia, and I adore him. He has had a little bit of, I wouldn't say trouble, but he's taken a little bit of time to acclimatize to the weather where I live. Where my husband's aunt lives is, I don't know if you're familiar with Australia, but she lives pretty much on the border between South Australia and Victoria. I live south of Melbourne, so there's a bit of a disparity there in terms of climate. Her climate's a lot warmer than mine during summer, but in winter it gets a lot colder. So he's acclimatizing a little bit to the weather, more so in my area. So you will see there are a few leaves that aren't doing, you know, so great, but I'm not worried. And the reason I'm not worried, and this is probably a really good thing to show you, is you can see all of these new leaves folding out. Now these ones, they almost look, I don't know, let me show you, like a peachy pink. Is that even focusing? Focus! Focus, please. Yes. So they're kind of like a peachy pink color as they start to develop, and once they develop, you get this kind of foliage. They do go green, they elongate, and you do see more of the silver dots appear. Again, as we were talking, with a fibrous begonia, you do get these longer stalks. But even here, I don't know whether, such an awkward plant to hold up to the camera. Where are you? There. So if you can kind of see right there, we do have some new growth coming through. New growth coming through up here. So, like I said, even though he's losing some leaves, I'm not too worried. He's definitely throwing me some new growth. One down. Next one. I go this one. This was actually my first begonia. This is a begonia maculata. I believe he is a whitey eye. He is a little bit different in the last angel wing begonia that I showed you. You can see that his leaves are a little whiter. They are a little darker, and also the patterns are also a lot bigger and a lot more prominent. There are more dots, let's just put it that way. He has done very, very well since I brought him home. He was relatively inexpensive, and I think if you're a houseplant enthusiast or you're looking at getting into houseplants, you shouldn't have any trouble finding a Begonia maculata, even about that. If you're a houseplant enthusiast, you shouldn't have too much trouble locating one of these guys. I have found them at almost every nursery that I've visited in the last 6 months. So they are definitely really accessible and a fantastic way to introduce some interesting foliage into your home. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love it on green leaf, but when you look at this is just something on another level, and this is part of the reason these are so popular. The markings are just stunning. Moving on to my lucky last begonia, he is actually a very new addition, and when I say a very new addition, I've had him for only a few days. I actually picked him up in a country town in Australia, in Melbourne actually, called Ballarat, from a place called Formosa Nursery, which if you live in the area, I highly recommend. I found the staff there to be so helpful, so kind. They gathered very quickly that I was a plant nerd, and being so far away, it's kind of a little bit nervous to ship things or have a look at new stock, and they were wonderful in, you know, giving me the option to have click and collect, even though I don't know whether that's a service they generally offer. They took the time to speak with me about the types of plants that I like, and yeah, this is not sponsored. I paid for this guy, but I do want to say credit where credit is due. Formosa Nursery, you're doing great. This is a begonia snowcap. Now, the reason I believe this is a begonia snowcap is it has these, if you look towards the end of the leaves, they go completely silver. And that is what I understand identifies a begonia snowcap. However, with the tag still on, it literally just says begonia tree. So again, like with most of my begonias, I'm guessing, I'm researching, I'm doing my best. He's different in the others. As I said, you do get this out through here, this snow capping, but I've also noticed around the edges of the leaves, and let me just kind of bring this in so you can get a closer look. He does almost have this silver band around the edge. So I would definitely say he's a lot more spotty as opposed to this maculata, but neither of them aren't pretty, they're just different. And that's okay. I have different varieties, that's why I have so many. I mean, you don't have to pay me to collect more houseplants. I'm just gonna do that on my own. Terracotta pot hands, they're so dirty. Now I've shown you all my begonias, let's talk begonia care. When we're talking light, like most indoor plants, they do like a bright indirect light. I have found, especially with Rex begonias, if you put them in direct sunlight, they are going to fizzle, crisp, and burn and die. It is not what they like. Having said that, begonias that are of the Rex variety are generally more of an indoor plant, but I think it kind of stands for most of the indoor begonias. If you are keeping them inside, you don't want them in direct light, you want them in a bright, sunny, indirect position. I have found, and again, especially Rex begonias, to be particularly fussy with water. What I mean by that is that they are particularly susceptible to root rot, but they don't like to get too dry either. So I think you'll find, as I have myself, that you do need to, if it is something you haven't had before or a plant you've not owned, really work on finding that good spot between having soggy soil or moist soil to having not giving it root rot and not letting it dry out too much. For that reason, I would recommend free draining soil, definitely a pot with holes in it. Do not put this in a holeless pot. I mean, you can, and you may have success. I just probably wouldn't recommend it. Begonias do prefer a higher humidity. You don't have to, you know, it doesn't have to be anything too crazy, but I definitely wouldn't recommend letting the air get super dry. That probably is applicable to most houseplants. So if you do have a spot in your home that is perhaps a little bit more humid, that might be a place to potentially put these plants. In terms of temperature, I know that they are not super frost tolerant. Some varieties are. I definitely know the Rex varieties are not. I would say if you're wanting a more frost tolerant variety for outdoors, something like an angel wing. As I said, this guy, he's a cutting off a mother plant, but he has survived many, many cold winters. But I would probably recommend probably a 15 to like late 20 degrees temperature. I think if you're gonna let it get probably below 10 degrees, you're probably gonna see them go dormant and potentially die. Let's talk propagation. Begonias I have found to be much easier than a lot of other plants to propagate. This outdoor rhizomatous begonia, I snapped one off accidentally. I stuck it in the soil, he grew roots. He's a happy little guy now outside. Those rhizomes are designed to creep across the soil. So if you do find that one snaps off, stick it in some soil, even in water. I've done it in water and you will see the roots start to grow. Pop them into some soil or whatever substrate or medium you prefer, and you're going to have another plant. When it comes to, I'm gonna pull this guy out again. When it comes to cane begonias, these again can be propagated. If I was gonna propagate them, I'd probably take, if I was gonna propagate you, where would I do it? Even something like this little section here, you can see, let me just pull this back. I could probably cut him off about here. I could stick him in some water and he will root. I've actually lost a couple of leaves off him, and even just a leaf with a tiny bit of petiole on it, I have stuck in soil and had it grow. So I think it kind of depends on, you know, the cutting. Not all cuttings are going to survive, but it's definitely one of the easier plants to propagate. For me, the second easiest plant to propagate, the first being something in the Monstera group, like an Adansonii, a Deliciosa, something like that, that's super easy to propagate. I've done a lot of talking today, so I'm just gonna wrap up by going through some 3 humble jungle tips to having happy begonia. The first one is using distilled water if you can. Now I know this sounds obnoxious and probably a little bit more than you have time for. Distilled water is probably the wrong term. Try not to use tap water if you do have a high salt content, or you know if you have a high salt content. If you're not sure and you're a little nervous, fill up a little glass jug, watering can of water, leave it outside for 24 hours. That's gonna help that evaporate, or that salt evaporate. The reason you don't want your water to be too salty, I mean, I think for the most part, it's kind of obvious. But particularly with begonias, it will actually push the salt to the outside of the leaves to evaporate. And as the salt evaporates, your leaves will crisp. And if you're like me, you don't want crispy leaves. You want beautiful, lush foliage. Next point is to keep the humidity up. As I mentioned earlier, they do prefer a higher humidity. Now you can do this either by putting it in a more humid spot in your home. If you find that your home isn't all that humid, misting, pebble trays, humidifiers, there are so many different options ranging from expensive to cheaper that you can actually use to keep that humidity up. But I definitely say you'll find that your plant will definitely enjoy the higher humidity. Third humble jungle tip is, if you do have a flowering genera, definitely deadhead your blooms. What I mean by that, if you haven't heard that term before, is when you see your blooms starting to die off, starting to not look so hot. I mean, you can look at a flower and generally be able to tell if it's on its way out. Cut it off. Snip, 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 goodbye. The reason you want to do that is because your plant is then going to redirect the energy that it was spending trying to keep that bloom alive into other things, whether that be pushing new roots, pushing new blooms, pushing new foliage. There's no point in having your plant waste energy on a flower that is already dying. Chop that sucker off. Whew. I think that's it for begonia. If there is anything that I forgot to cover, please yell at me. Like, maybe not actually yell at me, like maybe not in a mean way, but do feel free to let me know. I want to create the best videos for you. I want to be as informative as I can. I have so many plants and there is nothing that I enjoy more than talking about them. That I think is pretty common throughout people that do have plants, but yeah, begonia is just definitely a favorite of mine. Before I leave you today, I'm actually going to include some footage of the Ballarat Begonia Festival 2021. This is a festival that happens every year in the city of Ballarat in Victoria, Australia. I hadn't been before and my mother-in-law had been telling me for the last few years, you need to go and do this. And I'm one of those people, my life gets busy, I forget. And I was actually fortunate enough that she remembered to remind me. So last weekend, my husband and I headed up there and I was blown away. And I don't say that lightly. It was so much more than I expected. Even if you just like plants, the botanical gardens at Ballarat are absolutely stunning, and Ballarat really, really go out of their way to make it a special time. This year, and I obviously can't speak to previous years because I haven't gone, but this year they had a giant greenhouse set up with this walk-through area and there were so many different kinds of begonias. In this greenhouse, they had so many different types of begonias. They had some running water. It was just, I could have lived in there. I literally, you could have just cleared everyone out, locked the door, and I would have been stoked to live there. They had so many different varieties, different cultivars that have just been so stunning to look at. Something I also found really cool is it's not just the botanical gardens that get involved. We went out for lunch afterwards and on every table in the cafe that we were at, they had begonia and you could buy them. The nursery that we went to had a whole section of begonia, and I just love how the whole town seemed to get involved in this love for begonia. So if you definitely have the time, I would recommend the Begonia Show 2022. What year are we in? 2020? 2022 will be the next one. Whether you're a begonia lover or not, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If there's anything that I've forgotten to mention, anything I've got wrong, please do chuck a comment down below. We will be continuing the A to Z plant series. The next one we've got coming up will be, well, C obviously, but I plan to cover Calathea and Caladium, two of my favorites. So that's going to be really exciting. Please do hit subscribe if you do want to keep up to date with the A to Z of plants. Another thing I'm also going to be doing in the near future is doing a small series on pests. Pests was something that I didn't worry about too much when I started getting houseplants, but I feel like now I've got enough experience with a few of them to be able to share some of that knowledge with you. So if there is a particular pest that you are suffering for or want me to cover sooner rather than later, again, chuck a comment down below. All the feedback that I get, I do read and I do take on board. So please don't hesitate to say hey, because hey friend, that's what we're here for. All right, so I'm starting to ramble, so thank you again so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, stay safe. The world is still a crazy place, so make sure you're all taking care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys. Oh, I'm 12.